Welcome to Tech Driven Business, brought to you by Innovative Solution Partners. In this episode, I welcome Mark Stifter, a global governance, risk, and compliance entrepreneur. Not only will he lay the foundation down for compliance, but he will share best practices he has learned along the way. Hello, Mark. Welcome to Tech Driven Business. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today.
Well, welcome. So today we will be talking about compliance, and I would like to hear what you have seen based on your experience. How does that sound to you?
It sounds good.
I want to start from the ground up. Let's begin with where do compliance initiatives come from, and how or why do they impact individuals and organizations? What's your experience?
Yeah. So really, what I've seen is compliance initiatives come from four main areas. Regulatory, like the SEC. Everybody's probably heard of Sarbanes-Oxley. The FDIC or the OCC with the banking, with Bank Secrecy Act or anti-money laundering. FINRA, that protects investors and safeguards market integrity. Like those are, when you talk about regulatory spaces, those are one of the four that I see. Another area is the board. The board could decide that, maybe they just got back from a conference where they've learned something new about their industry around risk. Maybe their particular industry now has a higher risk profile around cybersecurity. So they decide that they want to have a more stringent cybersecurity compliance program. So that's a second way that it comes down. And then maybe some of the executives, like the CFO, could decide that they want more rigor around their month-end, quarter-end, or year-end close. And they say, all right, coming from the CFO's office, we want to bolster up controls around that. And then one of the areas I think a lot of people don't expect, but I see it a lot, is from the sales organization. The VP of sales that's selling a particular product may say, my sales force out there keeps getting requests to demonstrate that we have some sort of third-party review around maybe our software or application that has safeguards because maybe the client's data is going to reside in it. Those are really the four main areas that I see it. And what I kind of thought we'd talk about today is not as much the philosophy around those business decisions, but more of like a 101 of what I've seen happen after these edicts come from above, and how some people have, what you want to see in place prior to leveraging a technology or a solution. Like as a technologist, if you hear you're being tasked with implementing a governance, risk, and compliance tool, like a GRC tool, like in Open Pages, or maybe SAP. SAP has a GRC module. Archer's got one, or maybe you're being asked to leverage some robotic process automation to automate some controls for maybe internal audit. That's kind of like what I see happening, and always the IT guys are not really brought right into it, or the control owners that are responsible for executing this don't really understand, haven't been brought up to speed of what's going on, because generally these initiatives come and need to be done really fast. So really, I'll get into the definition of like what controls are in a bit, but really the better one understands how and why people are going to use the tools, the better app one will be to implement something that functions well. Has flexibility for potential, operational changes and the like. Like an example of something that I saw not too long ago was when it came with a tool that was implemented that it was in and around the compliance space, but it probably people have seen similar instances in other tools. Is an organization that looked at North America as, they managed it as the West, the Central, and the East. And once they decided that they had grown and they had matured a bit, and they really wanted one of the people that was running one of those regions to step up and run all in North America, there wasn't a possibility with the way the hierarchy of the tool was built. So in order to see those three regions, you had to be an admin, because nobody thought down the road we need additional levels of the hierarchy of the users. So, it's just
That's interesting.
seeing things like that,
Yeah, no, and then it kind of brings up a little segue on that question for me. So, you mentioned the four drivers, right? Now, from an industry perspective, do you see, compliance being heavy in one industry versus another, or is it pretty standard across the board?
Well, I would say that, financial services are pretty highly regulated. Healthcare is pretty highly regulated. And then across industries, any organization that is publicly traded is going to have additional scrutiny around how they demonstrate that their numbers are accurate, that they're reporting to Wall Street.
Interesting. So I think that kind of takes me to my next question is, how do we, what happens when leadership decides that they need to demonstrate compliance? How does that whole thing trigger?
Yeah, so, well, it's important to have a basic understanding of what people are looking at when it comes to compliance. So briefly, I'll explain the hierarchy of compliance with policies, procedures, and controls, and then I'll cover high level roles that are involved and how it kind of trickles down once the senior executives or the board makes a decision. But so for simply put, a policy's on the top end, at a 1 or a 10,000 foot level, assume that's the edict of the company, right? The company's going to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is, based off of whatever one of those four scenarios that I was talking about, the compliance is going to come from. Then under that is the procedures, and procedures are basically establishing official way of doing something. It's like guidance. They vary from level and detail. Some can be step-by-step procedurals. Some people call those desktop procedures, and some can be much higher level. But the basis for compliance, a lot of it all comes down to the controls. So to give you a little basic overview of what this means, because this is really where the rubber meets the road for people that are at a company. They're being told generally to execute a control and provide documentation and evidence, and they don't always necessarily know why they're doing it. It tends to slow down processes, and it causes confusion when people don't understand what it's really there for. So, basically, what is a control? Is something that's put in place to prevent or detect risk, right? Like fraud or somebody fat fingering a key into a financial system or something like that. For instance, a control could be offboarding and onboarding of users, making sure that the people that leave the organization are removed timely, things like that. Or segregation of duties is another control for code promotion, right? Or segregation of duties inside an ERP system where you can't have somebody who has the capability to initiate a payment and authorize a payment. Those are some examples of some basic controls. And then it comes down to the documentation of controls. There's manual controls, and then there's automated controls. And when it comes to a manual control, it needs to be written up in a manner in which somebody who comes behind you, who you're executing the control, can really re-perform what you're saying you're doing and come to the same conclusion. For instance, say once every 3 months, you're a system owner, and the business owner of the system has 100 users. So maybe once every 3 months, you send a list of those users to that business owner, saying, "Hey, do these users do they have the right level of access, or do they not have the right level of access?" And that's kind of a way of determining and having a control in place that somebody maybe switched from one department to another and maybe retained one level of access, and now they were given another level of access, but between those two accesses, maybe that could create a conflict. And then, for instance, in the same scenario, an automated control would be systems like an SAP is just by default not going to allow you to give one user roles that have a conflict. and that's an automated control.
Yeah, that's a good example that you use. I mean, I think one of the things that I can recall on some of the projects that I've been on, especially around manual controls, right? When you look at any manufacturing facility or bunch of these facilities, when you talk about automotive or any manufacturing outfit, they have folks doing different things at different times of the year, and they change job positions. And in those cases, I mean, without the manual control, there is no way for them to know exactly who switched when and what should be the new role or new access compared to what they had earlier. So I think it sounds pretty important for them to have that in place.
Yeah, and what I'll see like around a control like that, when I've been in a role where I've come through to assess compliance programs, and this is always something that upsets the IT people, and I get it, is they'll maybe not be notified by the business that somebody's changed a job or they're no longer with the organization. So they get audited and all of a sudden find out that there's somebody who still has access to a system that's no longer with the company. Well, it was either HR's fault or it was the business owner's fault. But the IT individual or the IT group are the ones that get hit with the deficiency. They're the ones that have to clean it up. They're the ones that get the black eye from it, if you will. And really, it winds up there because they're the ones that are able to fix it. And that's the reason why Absolutely. They get tasked with it and why they get the deficiency.
Absolutely. And I think this is where a lot of times the friction comes in these kind of situations where the control person is, or the department is much different than the person who is doing the actual work, right? And like you said, the IT versus business or HR in this case, it's a real scenario, real example of what happens in organizations, in general. So let me take a little segue into a personal question. So what have you found to be some of the most rewarding parts of your career? Have you been in the industry for quite some time? So you'd like to share some?
Yeah. So like there's been several different ones that I find rewarding. I've been an entrepreneur, so I've started and run companies before. And it was, very rewarding when an employee's coming to me and they're all excited because they're going to buy their first house or they're getting married and they want to share with me, big milestones. And I feel as though at times that I help make some of that happen, whether it was by providing a job or giving them some experience, and I've got a lot of old employees that have done very well for themselves and have moved way up the ranks. And I like to feel as though in some capacity I've been able to mentor them in some of that. And then there's other rewarding things when it comes to projects. I've had clients that have just been absolutely buried with the burden of compliance and been able to sit down and either work with their external auditors or their internal auditors and trim some of the controls out, or maybe work with their legal team and help determine that maybe some aspects of areas of compliance with a little interpretation, they do not need to do it, So those are some fun things that I've had.
That's great. Going back to our topic, let me ask you, what are some of the successful or unsuccessful characteristics of any compliance initiative that you have seen in your career? Can you share some examples?
Yeah. So really when it comes down to successes with compliance programs, it really comes down to how they're structured. And there's generally an approach that I've seen out there that is generally used. It's like the 3 lines of defense approach when it comes to a compliance program. And there's what they consider the first line, which is the operational management, which is really the people that are executing stuff. They're the process owners and the like. And then there's the risk management and compliance group, which is the second line. Now, they're really the ones that are generally the experts in the space of compliance. They're the ones that the operational people should be able to lean on. Right? You ask about what I've seen successful, and it's really when that first line of defense, the people that are doing the firefighting, that are keeping the lights on, that are doing the day-to-day business, that are running business processes and they're busy, and generally the need for compliance and controls in place slows down their job. So where I've really seen it be successful is where that risk management and compliance team, that second line of defense, really works collaboratively with the business owners and can really speed up. Sometimes I've even seen it where they've provided a lot of support with actually giving them extra arms and legs, right? Helping facilitate sessions for them. So the level 2, they're the folks that really have the expertise. Where I've seen them be really successful and where I've seen programs be successful is where they have, really partnered with the operations people and provide support above and beyond just expertise, where maybe they'll come in and they'll facilitate a session. They might have the ability to help draft up some controls or draft up some of the policies and procedures for that business unit, which really allows them to use their expertise, pull the information out of the first line of defense so they can keep working on their regular jobs, and then work collaboratively to get the controls in place and get the monitoring in place that they need.
Okay, that makes sense. So, I think that is a characteristic of a successful compliance initiative. Have you seen where you've seen some failures because either they did not follow the process or something didn't go right? Do you have an example of that?
Yeah, sure. So really, when it comes to compliance programs where I've seen things go really wrong, and things don't go really wrong quickly. They tend to go wrong over a period of time, and then they go really wrong quickly. But it's really the tone at the top. So, I've been in organizations where they are very open and very willing to have operations people that know that they have a deficiency, that know they have a problem, come forward. So the right amount of support can be given to them. Where people are allowed to come in and kind of, self-divulge that they've got an issue and get it fixed. That seems to work well. Where I've seen, on the other hand, where leadership says maybe my bonus is being tied to the success of this, and maybe there's metrics tied around deficiencies or something like that, where they come down with a hammer on people that do have a problem. That creates an environment where those problems are buried and they're hidden. And, it can happen where somebody's hidden them for a while and then they change roles and the new person takes it on, has no idea the problem's even there. And then all of a sudden it turns into a much larger problem, where maybe an external auditor comes in and finds out that there is a huge problem with your segregation of duties, or you haven't been identifying the production of code properly and making sure that there's the right controls around code production, promotion, and the like. So those are some of the areas where I've seen it really bad, and it comes from.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think we covered quite a bit today, Mark. I'd like to wrap up this session, but what would be the one takeaway you would want our listeners to leave with us today?
Well, I would say, the one takeaway would be I guess I'd almost need two takeaways, right? So like the one of the takeaways for the business side, the people that are actually executing the controls on a day-to-day basis, is like understanding how those can really be important and how they do impact the organization. if they don't understand that and it just really looks like overhead to them, they should be explained by their leadership why it's important, how it impacts the organization. That's one thing. The other thing is on the IT side is if you hear rumblings of a system implementation around compliance, a compliance system or anything like that, make sure you're on the steering committee right away. Make sure that you're involved, because I've seen it go bad with implementations when IT is brought in too late. So those are the two big ones I would say when it comes around compliance.
Totally agree. I think the last one I can relate to it directly, because it's always the last guys who show up at the door and they are the ones doing the work and I had no idea.
If you want another story, I've got another quick story about that, where a system implementation was going in. IT was never brought into the loop. The vendor was getting ready to, the business had signed off on everything, and the vendor was getting ready to migrate everything over to the IT department and give them production and everything. And the IT department was purely a Microsoft stack, and they had built everything in Oracle, and they just said, we can't take it. So it was like 8 months of work out the window. So,
wow. Yeah, that's a good takeaway. I mean, I think that's the one as a key to for a lot of folks who are going down this path, may want to keep that in mind. With this, I would like to wrap up our session, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Tech Driven Business, brought to you by Innovative Solution Partners. Mark shared some key points on compliance and how to be successful with it. His key takeaways: truly understand how controls impact your organization and the importance of bringing in your IT department early on. We would love to hear from you. Continue the conversation by connecting with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Learn more about Innovative Solution Partners and schedule a free consultation by visiting isolutionpartners.com. Never miss a podcast by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Information is in the show notes.